No, this isn't a Nokia 5800, it's the X6. It's darn similar to the 5800 with latest firmware though, which is why I'm going to keep things brief. S65th edition in this basic form is very familiar to almost everybody. The X6 has the kinetic interface bits in dialogues, lists, without actually going all the way to kinetic app screens, N97 style. What's new here is hardware. This is the first of many, hopefully, Nokia smartphones with capacitive touchscreens. Yes, resistive screens have their pros, but most markets do seem to prefer the newer, sexier technologies. So, in addition, this is unashamedly a music-focused device. There are two whopping great speakers here, 5800 style. You can hear them starting up here. Again, probably the best speakers of any phone in the world. Surely, there's a 16 or 32 gigabyte mass memory disk, depending on how you buy the X6, to keep all the music in, I can't think. You do lose the flexibility of a micro SD card though. There's no swapping here of media from device to device. Also new is a camera upgrade to 5 megapixels. It's of higher quality than the 5800s too, but it won't challenge the units in Nokia's top-end smartphones. My problems with the X6 are these. Build quality. It's plastic all round despite the relatively high price point, and I don't expect a £350 smartphone to make these sorts of creaking noises every time I hold it. The key lock rattles, and it's going to last days rather than years, and the peel-off back cover just inspires no confidence whatsoever. I hold the X6 and I just want to go back to cradling my Nokia N97 Mini and all that metal. Oh. Number 2, despite a rather nice but erratic scrolling contact carousel here on the home screen and all the usual Ovi maps and store goodness, we are firmly into 2010 now, and I'm starting to want a bit more from these devices in terms of interface, speed and response. Symbian 3 really can't come soon enough. The X6 isn't a slow phone unless you really start loading it up with music, but it's no Lightning McQueen either. Number 3, lazy software. As on the Sony Ericsson VVAS reviewed in the previous show, Nokia has made no effort in terms of adding value. The S65th edition app screens aren't kinetic, like on the N97, and there's no searching in the music player. You have to go and find search under the internet folder, amazingly, just to search for a music track in your library on the phone. Number 4, penny pinching hardware. I've mentioned the plastic before, but then there's the old style 2mm Nokia charging pin, not the 2009-2010 micro USB system. And putting the X6 besides my N97, I can't help feel they could have squeezed in a 3.5-inch screen instead. The black plastic border all round is just such a waste, especially when viewing the X6 next to the iPhone, a direct competitor. Was picking a 3.2-inch screen really a cost-saving necessity? Number 5, I could go on and on. The TFT screen tech used. I mean, you can't read the screen outdoors in sunlight or even easily in a sunny room like this. There will, I'm sure, be many happy X6 buyers among the music-loving masses, but I suspect there will be a few geeks and semi-geeks like me who grab it for the new screen and then walk away rather disappointed. This is the Nokia X6.
Hello, Tim Salmon here with my first video review for the phone show. This is going to be a comparison between the Google Nexus One and the HTC's Desire, which seems now to be leaking out into distribution channels. My first observation is that physically they're all but identical. When you look a little closer though, you'll see that there are some differences and that the Nexus One is more pleasingly constructed, but more of that later. So why should HTC make two devices almost identical? Well, Google want to keep the Nexus One as the Android flagship and specifically ordered its manufacture without HTC Sense UI software overlay, a friendly front end which HTC has made very well and which brings many pleasing features to their Android devices which you don't get with Google devices. The Nexus One benefits from voice input instead of text, pretty much across the OS, embedded into their on-screen keyboard, over-the-air firmware updates instead of needing a desktop computer, direct access to the Google servers, which means keeping a log of your device's configuration and applications so that after a reset or change to a new device, they can put it back just as it was before. HTC's Sense UI, on the other hand, offers a wealth of benefits which the Nexus doesn't, like 7 home screens and themes, but most significantly, very tight integration with key social networks at startup, along with your email, contacts and calendar. Notifications, interactions and close working between all your PIM data is then at hand. Even the lowly HTC Tattoo features all this. So you pays your money and you takes your choice. On to the physical then, and the Desire's all-new optical button. This feels solid enough and maybe even more reassuring than the Nexus's rollerball, and it clicks nicely when pressed to take photographs. I can't help thinking though that the Nexus's solution is more accurate to use, particularly when needing to finely adjust text. Unlike the rollerball, the optical button has no LED built in, so notifications are only available via the power LED at the top, much less flexible than the Nexus One's multicoloured rollerball. Turning to the 4 buttons across the bottom of each of the screens, generally speaking, having hardware buttons to press is much more pleasing than the Nexus's soft keys, which form part of the capacitive screen, particularly when, at present, they are actually slightly offset on the Nexus and need to be hit slightly high to register. Of course, this is fixable in firmware by Google, but nothing has come yet. The Desire's back button is not so well placed, being off to the right, further to travel for left-handed use. But arguably, it's more central generally. The Desire is slightly squarer in design, with sharper lines all round. This makes it much less likely to be dropped than the Nexus, which has smooth curves all round. The Desire has a single-piece pull-off back cover, which forms the whole of the back of the device, whereas the Nexus has a smaller cover, but because of the latter's metal extending halfway up the back, it proves to be much more solid in design. Because of the Desire's back being bigger and plastic, it gives a little and feels a little cheaper than the Nexus's. All in all, I prefer the physical design of the Nexus One, though the Desire wins big brownie points for its hardware buttons. The Desire introduces the latest incarnation of the Sense UI front end, which includes the helicopter view screen switching, as you saw in Steve's HTC Legend review in the Phone Show 106. This is pleasing to the eye and very functional, though the pinch zoom action to invoke it remains difficult to manage, particularly one-handed. A double press of the home button has been thoughtfully added as an alternative. HTC have merged their desktop widgets now with the Android ones, where previously they were in separate lists. Not a huge problem, but a nice touch nonetheless. Sense UI continues to sport 7 home screens, where the Nexus only has 5. But in reality, particularly with optional folder support, I can't really see me filling even 5, let alone 7. We've already covered most of the benefits of the Sense UI, so I won't go over them all again, just to say that nothing has been taken away, and in some areas it has actually been enhanced. Sense UI stands alone in my view when looking at the front-end software various manufacturers have added to Android phones, in that it does the job well. It provides a truly enhanced experience for the user, and it's not a fragmented mishmash. Of course, the measure of how smart a phone is comes down to how you can interact with it. The Nexus One stands alone in this regard with its voice input right across the UI. Wherever you see an on-screen keyboard, you'll also see a microphone icon, and you can touch it to talk instead of type. We've covered this before, and Steve has done testing with this method in Phone Show 104. It's not perfect, and you'll need to follow a few speaking rules to use it effectively, but if we know Google, they'll get there. On the other hand, the Desire uses the very good keyboard options embedded in Sense UI, including T9 input, which the Nexus can't do at all without third-party software. These keyboard options are the best I've used as a whole, though they don't quite match up to the iPhone standards. It does, however, give you a great interface to text one-handed on a train or in a bus queue or with a bag in the other hand, where you wouldn't want to talk to your phone anyway. With Nexus, your only option in this situation is to use two hands. The cameras have the same top-notch lenses and flash for the casual snapper and do a perfectly adequate job. The Desire's interface is more polished and developed with face detection, metering mode, widescreen option with view covering the whole screen, brightness, contrast, saturation and sharpness controls, all over and above the interface on the Nexus. The user interface has been developed nicely and thought out better. In video mode, the Desire is ahead again with more tweaking options and recording capacity in both MPEG-4 and H.263. The Desire's sharing options are better, if no more numerous, in that they can be accessed directly from the camera screen instead of having to head for the gallery first, as you have to do with the Nexus One. The phone and PIM functions again seem more polished than the Nexus, in that from the dial screen a person's name or number can be input and the system searches on the fly to match possible people and numbers as you go. A great example of fast indexing and searching of a database. We've seen this of course on many other phones over the last 2 or 3 years, but Google still chooses to omit it from the Nexus One. The Nexus often experiences some lag when updating PIM data from the Google servers, whereas the Desire seems to access it quicker and gets its refresh done more efficiently. The Nexus seems to be a little ahead here though, as it will at least let you get on with something else while it's doing it, and the Desire tends to want more of the RAM and the processor to execute the task. Of course, they both talk to all the Google services, as you'd expect, very fluently. Where the Desire shines over the Nexus One in PIM activity is with its fully integrated setup routine and integration with social networks from the outset. It talks to Twitter, Facebook and Flickr from the word go and sets the ball rolling very impressively. Contacts on the Nexus One doesn't hold a light to people on the Desire. HTC have done a grand job with this near perfect integration. The Nexus One seems to be ahead of pretty much all the Android competition when it comes to marketplace integration. If your phone is lost or stolen, or if you just want to sell it or do a factory reset, the Google servers hold all the information about the apps you have bought and downloaded, even the free ones, and plugs that information back into the phone during setup. This is a very impressive feat and represents super integration. The Desire goes some way to trying this, but stops short of adding anything that has not been purchased. After such a string of positives, you may be expecting me to say that the Desire wins. Certainly you can't deny that HTC have thought long and hard about how Sense UI is implemented, and provided a sterling package. On paper, the Desire wins. In the hand, well, it's not quite that simple. In the spring of 2010, the Desire is streets ahead of much of the competition and would wipe the floor with almost all of it. But don't forget that we're comparing like with like to a large degree here, so differences are often subtle, personal and subjective. In my view, as a Google services junkie, nothing from any of the big manufacturers could possibly be favoured over either of these two devices. So which one would I buy? If I didn't have the Nexus already, I might well have been tempted into buying the Desire. I wouldn't have had the benefits that the device brings when it is with Google. I wouldn't have fully appreciated the better build quality. I wouldn't have enjoyed the over-the-air firmware upgrades instead of needing to hook up to a desktop computer. And I wouldn't have experienced the psychological closeness and true integration with Google. It's a close call, but hopefully I've helped you make up your own mind. I'm going for the Nexus One, just. But in the meantime, I give you the HTC Desire.